Great. Thank you all for being here. Great show from our media, and I know it's because this is really an important topic for the residents that you communicate to. You know, throughout this past year, I've said many times that we'll get through this health crisis and the resulting economic downturn, and we'll get through it stronger together. We all must do our part to help and care for each other, and that includes having a state government that is there for its residents. The COVID-19 pandemic has ravaged our communities, changed our way of life, and further exposed deep inequalities in our society, leaving many people unemployed and barely hanging on financially, while others, including millionaires and billionaires and large corporations, saw their wealth grow exponentially. The state budget we passed this week presented an opportunity to step up and tackle some of these deep, troubling, and systemic issues. An opportunity upon which we seized. Last year, we held a press conference right here, and the delegation made a commitment to the families we represent, all of the residents of the greater Rochester area, that as your representatives, we will work together for you. And we've done just that, meeting together on a regular basis, calling and texting on a daily basis, fully engaged as a delegation to hash out policy decisions, and over the last few months, budget decisions and priorities. We met this difficult moment in time with an unyielding commitment to the families that we represent. As a result, our delegation delivered. We delivered a robust, people-centered budget. It ensures millionaires and billionaires pay their fair share while reducing middle-class taxes and creating real property tax relief. The budget includes historic increases in education funding, invests in workforce development and job training, helps small businesses rebound, and ensures access to quality, affordable health care. This budget directs critical aid to the families of the greater Rochester area, and I thank my delegation colleagues for their collaboration and partnership in delivering a budget for the families we serve. More specifically, the budget provides $2.3 billion in combined federal and state aid for rental assistance to help our families stay in their homes. As chair of the Assembly's Economic Development Committee, I also fought hard to support our small businesses. The budget allocates $1 billion for a business relief package, including $800 million for the COVID-19 Pandemic Small Business Recovery Grant Program. Furthermore, the spending plan provides $8.2 billion in federal aid and an additional $3.1 billion in state aid over last year's dollar amount to invest in our students. The budget increases foundation aid by $1.4 billion and provides a commitment to pay the full Campaign for Fiscal Equity debt over the next 3 years. This will especially help struggling schools like the Rochester City School District, and this represents another step forward in my ongoing fight for transformative change at the Rochester City School District, so all of our children, no matter their zip code, get the education they deserve. Although we are far from the road's end, the final budget was carefully crafted to take action and start rebuilding New York now. Those are just some of the highlights. But as I open my comments today, our delegation did this as a team. We did this for the families we represent. And now it's time to hear from each of them for further comments. And we'll start with Senator Samra Group. the senator from the 55th Senate District. Samra?
Thank you so much, Assemblymember Bronson, and hello to everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I think my colleague really drove home the importance of a delegation working together. And I think another thing that you really see in this New York State budget is what I would call responsive government. Many of us spent the last year talking to community members, elected officials, parents, teachers, doctors, nurses, social workers, and listening to what COVID-19 was doing to them, doing to families, and doing to our communities. And what we see here in this budget is a response to what we heard. Because we knew we needed a budget that worked for the millions of New Yorkers who make this state run. And that's what you see here. That's what you see when you have progressive leadership. That's what you see when you have collaborative leadership. You have answers and solutions to some of the struggles and the challenges that our communities have been facing for decades. Assemblymember Bronson talked about the foundation aid funding, and I have to share that education was a top priority for me throughout last year and into my first tenure as a state senator. And I can't tell you how many students have come to me, emailed me, called me, talked to me at events to tell me, how have we not done this yet? To ask me, do you really care? How will you be different than people who have come before you? And I am so proud that I get to stand here today with my colleagues to say this is how we are different. We are different because we made a choice to fight and to not relent, to make sure that $1.4 billion was in this state budget, to make sure that we do fully fund foundation aid. And so no longer do you have to listen to me say that the schools in the 55th District are owed over $100 million, because within the next 3 years, they will no longer be owed over $100 million. And that has changed lives and will continue to change lives in the future for our community. Another thing that we did as chair of the Mental Health Committee in the Senate was to push to fight against cuts that the governor wanted to put through. We know that mental health needs are much higher, in addition to the physical health challenges we've seen with COVID-19, social isolation, being locked out of your normal routines as a young person. These are things that are affecting folks' mental health, and we certainly could not have accepted an austerity mindset to be cutting mental health services when in fact we should be reinvesting in them. And so I'm proud that we were able to make major changes in rejecting the 5% cuts to mental health services, and to fight for the first time in 12 years a cost of living increase to make sure that mental health providers who have been on the front lines of so much of this pandemic will get paid living wages. Finally, as we stand here in the city of Rochester, where we know for the past year or so, and many decades before that, we've been dealing with police brutality. We've been in the national news, and even, if I'm honest, international news about some of the challenges that we have here in the city, which is why I'm so proud that this delegation was able to deliver $500,000 to the Police Accountability Board. That is historic. In this country, no state has ever taken an interest in helping transparency and community voices being uplifted through police accountability. So New York State is leading the charge in that, and I'm grateful to our leadership, Andrea Stewart-Cousins, for seeing the need that we don't want Rochester in the news for brutality and lack of transparency. We want to be in the news for innovation and for the solutions that we are putting forth that are grounded in community. So we are proud of the things that we've been able to deliver as a delegation, but I want to also remind folks, we know our work is not done. We may take a couple of days to talk about this incredible wins that we've had in 2021, but what we've shown you is what we're capable of, again, when we're responsive and collaborative, and when we highlight the voices of our communities in Albany. This is what we're able to deliver, and I can't wait to continue to work with this delegation for many, many more years as we continue to bring back everything we can for our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Brooke. And as she mentioned, the budget cuts that the governor proposed, those were 5% cuts across the board, and we rejected that and funded all those programs, at the very least at the levels last year, and in most cases above last year's numbers. Let's now hear from Senator Jeremy Cooney, Senator from the 56th Senate District.
Thank you, Assembly Member. I'm Jeremy Cooney. I'm proud to serve as the chair of the Senate Committee on Upstate Cities. And those of you who know me know I'm a hometown guy. And Rochester as a city has struggled for a long time with issues that we care deeply about, namely poverty. 47% of Rochester's children still live in poverty. And so for me, my focus in this budget process was about jobs. Jobs for the people of Rochester and the citizens of Monroe County. And we collectively delivered $800 million in small business grants, an additional $200 million in tax credits. We've talked a lot as a community about our favorite restaurants that have been struggling during this pandemic. As a group, we invested in those restaurant owners by making sure there are grants to get their workers back to reopen safely as we hopefully soon come out of this pandemic. I'm also a member of the Transportation Committee. We know in Rochester that we have trouble with our roads. We have bridges that need to be repaired. These are not new issues, but it took a new team coming together and fighting together for Rochester to deliver big. Over $350 million for infrastructure investments in our state, including a new $100 million fund for urban roadways. So think about the most troubled urban roads in our community, and now we have funds to repair them and to keep the businesses along those commercial corridors healthy. Jobs are what will turn around poverty in this community. And I'm so proud to work with this amazing team to act united and to fight for Rochester. You know, I'll take a personal moment and just share that a few months ago, all of us, a little bit nicer weather guys, we're upstairs by the mural, and we were standing together as candidates, pledging to do what we did today, which is to deliver for Rochester. We've all talked about schools. And on a personal note, as a graduate of the Rochester City School District, it is incredibly meaningful to me to make sure that we are investing in the schools, in the teachers, in the students, and in the families that have gone forgotten for far too long. This ends now, and it ends with this delegation. So I couldn't be prouder to join them, and I'm excited to deliver this budget with my teammates for Rochester. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy. And as he just noted, all areas, small businesses, so that our mom and pop shops can continue to rebound, but also because they employ most of our family members. So we're going to keep jobs and allow them to continue to provide for their families, transportation dollars. But I think after hearing both Samra and Jeremy, you're also noticing that now we have representation in both houses of state government, the Senate and the Assembly, and we're working together as a team. Now let's hear from another Assembly member, Jennifer Lunsford, the 135th Assembly District.
Thank you all so much. And you've heard from my colleagues about some of the amazing wins we've had from Monroe County. I want to talk very specifically about childcare. And I want to talk about how this group of people has come together to make historic, systemic change in childcare, not just for the people of Monroe County, but across New York State. You know, the Children and Families Committee has 3 members of this delegation, myself, Assemblymember Clark, and Assemblymember Meeks. And right from the start, we hit the ground running to make sure that we delivered on the promises we made to the families reliant on childcare like myself, that we would make childcare more affordable, that we would make it more accessible, and that's exactly what we did. We are delivering a historic $2.8 billion investment in childcare in this state. We are ensuring that our providers can keep their doors open, that our low-income families can pay for the childcare that they need. We are making sure that everyone who needs to access childcare can. And that's because we work together. That's because we joined our voices to make them loud for the people of Monroe County. The budget, all governance really, is a volume game. And you need to yell together to make your voices loud. When I heard from people in my district about how they were struggling and how they were seeing money going to New York City and money going to New York City needs. I told them that if you elect members of the majority delegation, you will see that change. You will see upstate priorities front and center, and that's what we've done here. We've delivered $235 million for upstate transit, because when that federal money came in for transit services and the MTA tried to suck it up, we said no. And we stood for the transit here in Rochester, here in Monroe County. We made sure that when rent relief was coming, that our mom and pop landlords were taken care of too, that there were ways for landlords to apply for housing assistance for their tenants who were unable to substantiate their income. We fought for practical solutions to make sure the people of our districts could actually access the programs we were creating. And I'm so proud to be a part of this delegation and to lift my voices with theirs. Thank you all so much for coming today, and I can't wait to keep fighting.
Thank you, Jennifer. And you know, it's great having moms as part of the delegation, and Jennifer's one of our moms. And you see it. Their focus is on what they really feel and live themselves so that they can help other families, and childcare is one of those areas. But we have another mom in the delegation, and she's going to come up next. Assembly Member Sarah Clark, the 136th Assembly District.
Yes, go moms. There's two real points. I mean, it's getting harder and harder to speak because, you know, all the wonderful wins are being already talked about. But there's two main things. First and foremost, as a delegation, I just can't emphasize enough how it was always a team effort. You could call anyone, you would check in with people, you'd be like, did you catch this one? Did you do this? And everyone would be like, oh, yeah, I'll get on that, you do that. And you know, it was just so refreshing to know that everybody was moving the bus forward for Rochester. Like, we were just gonna make sure that our community, for once, was not left behind. The second is the idea that when you invest in people, you recover faster. When you invest in the things that matter most to our families, like education, like childcare, like rent relief, like help for our restaurants and small businesses, you will have a just recovery that doesn't leave people behind. And that's what we aimed to do in this budget. I heard last night that there were some students that testified at the City School District hearing, and the first words out of their mouth was that they felt heard and seen for the first time ever by their elected officials. And that's what we're doing. That's what we're fighting for every day. So the historic wins in foundation aid, the difference it will make in our schools, the game changer it'll be for our students, it's just hard not to continue to talk about it. Child care, working with Assemblywoman Lunsford has been just a dream to have someone as excited and passionate about it as I am. Child care is infrastructure, child care is economic development. We do not recover unless we take that system off life support and make it work for everyone. We also had smaller wins. We had $8 million added for the first time ever to help our seniors get off wait lists for critical services. We got $10 million for a statewide investment in gun violence prevention for the first time ever, which Rochester so critically needs right now. We got TAP increase for the first time in 7 years of $500 and a commitment to close the gap. We are making a difference in what makes a difference in everyone's lives every day. We are going to do that. It is our commitment. We know there's more work to do, and we are excited to do it, but it's about listening to our people, elevating their voices, and making sure that we're getting done what needs to get done for our community. So I'm just so grateful to be part of this team. Thank you all for showing up. This is a win to celebrate, and tomorrow we go back to work. So thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. So two things that Sarah just said about listening to the people we represent and lifting up their voices. So last year, I met with a number of high schoolers from the Rochester City School District, and you know, they worked with me through the whole monitor situation and lifting up the school district and helping to transform it, and they also were advocating for this funding. And so I'm so glad that the team was able to deliver. The other piece is, up until January, I was chair of the Aging Committee. I am so thankful that Assemblymember Sarah Clark is now on the Aging Committee, and she just hit the road running, fighting to make sure Lifespan got their money, and with the help of the Senate, actually got an increase again this year. So, Sarah, thank you for that. Now turning to another Assembly member, Damon Meeks with the 137th Assembly District. Damon?
Oh. Hey, thank you, Harry, and thank you to the full delegation. It's been an honor. Harry, we appreciate the leadership here. It's funny because some of the things that we've endured, you know, we recognize Harry as the dean of the delegation, but in some regards, you know, the fraternity guy in me may say that the dean of pledging, but so let's get started here. So as a delegation and legislative body, we have committed to fighting for and implementing legislation that pushes back against racist and social injustices. However, there's more work to be done. While we are committed to changing policies at the state levels, we must also be intentional about changing the culture and practices that continue to be a barrier for our community and true progress. There have been, initially I had 18 on my paper, but 19 as of this morning. 19 homicides in Rochester in the past 3 months. 4 of those have been in the past 48 hours. We would be remiss to not acknowledge these tragedies and use this moment to begin thinking of a restorative path forward. It is no coincidence that in the 3rd poorest city in the United States that suffers from this level of violence based upon poverty and many other factors. So while this budget will begin to address the scarcity we have been living with for decades, it is up to us to address the symptoms of said scarcity as it relates to our community's culture and collective mindset. As a community, we must look within ourselves and order our steps toward a future in which our community is thriving together. We can start today. We can be the change, but external forces will not solve internal problems. So I encourage everyone watching, sitting at home, to ask yourselves what your contribution will be to the future of our community. As a former organizer for the Alliance for Quality Education, I know firsthand the fight for a sound basic education for our youth. Many of us have fought this fight for decades, including parents, advocates, and legislators. I am truly honored to have been able to see this fight through and to be a part of the delegation that finally legislated foundation aid to be fully paid back over the next 3 years. I remember in the beginning of my time in the seat, I told everyone, imagine a Rochester where teachers are not worried about the next round of layoffs, and students have books they can actually take home and study. How powerful is the mind of a community that dares to dream? Working families and child care providers needed a substantial path forward after the economic devastation that came with the onset of the pandemic. And through advocacy and prioritizing the community, we have delivered a historic investment of $2.4 billion to help lay the foundation that will stabilize this industry and expand access to all families in need. Housing insecurity was at an all-time high, and while we passed the eviction moratorium, many feared a financial crisis on the horizon. The $3 billion in rent and homeowner relief passed in the budget will keep our neighbors in their homes and help to establish more affordable housing in our community. And let's not forget about our small businesses that had to perform massive terminations to their employees. We have passed an $800 million small business recovery grant program that will help us combat rising unemployment and rebuild our city's economy. I do not take these victories lightly. Our city deserves this, and my heart is full knowing that we were able to deliver. I look forward to doing much more. We were able to pass a budget that truly takes into consideration the many families that we represent throughout the city of Rochester and throughout the state of New York. So I'm glad to stand here with my colleagues, and we're committed to continuing this fight. Thank you.
Thank you, Demond. And two things. Number one, thank you for reminding us of the violence that's still happening in our streets, and that we absolutely have to address that in partnership with our other government leaders at all levels of government, but the state has a role as well. And then also, Demond mentioned, I didn't realize you actually were part of the Alliance for Quality Education. That's pretty cool. But this is a battle that's been fought since, I think it was 2006 when the lawsuit was brought. And it's been a long time coming, and for us to be able to deliver and to have this delegation be a part of making sure that happened is really phenomenal. So with that, we will take questions. You can ask general questions. If you want to ask a particular legislator a question, just mention his or her name, and we will now take questions. Anybody?
I'll start with a D while you're up there, holding it.
Thank you.
Can you talk a little bit about, this is your first time having a team like this, same party, same agenda, essentially. How much different was that in Albany in the negotiations?
Wow. It was very, very, very different and much more effective. Each of the conferences meet and have conversations about policy and budget decisions. And, for me to be able to be texting Sarah and Demond and Jen and say, I'm going to talk about this in conference. Can you back me up on this? And for them to do the same, or to have a conversation ahead of time and deal with that is just so much more effective. And then similarly with the two senators, being able to say, this is coming up in our conference, and we're talking about this. Where are you guys at in the majority conference in the Senate? And can you weigh in on this? And that's why the PAB funding came through. That's why we have upstate funding for legal aid programs that will focus, and we have a program here in Rochester that will deal with renters assistance and things of that nature. So it is rewarding, but mostly because that means that we as a delegation are delivering. Okay.
There hasn't been a delay of budget of this nature in such a long time. How difficult was it to put together this budget, with everything that was on the table, also given the fact that we were in a pandemic?
Yeah, so the pandemic, we put a budget together last year in the middle of the pandemic. Quite frankly, the barriers the pandemic forced last year were much harder because we hadn't worked out remote voting, we hadn't worked out so much of the logistics. Those are now worked out. This year, so the budget ended up being a number of days late. But you know what? I always say it's much more important to have a good budget than to have an on-time budget. And boy, do we have a good budget here. It's huge. It's $212 billion. That increase, significant amount of that increase comes because of the federal assistance. And thank you to Majority Leader Chuck Schumer and our local majority delegation for delivering that for the state and for our families. So, it was late, but it was timely, actually. Not on time, but timely. There wasn't a delay with getting checks out to our state workers and things of that nature. No agencies had a delay in getting their reimbursement funds that we're obligated to pay. And so, and at the end of the day, taking those extra 6 or 7 days was well worth it because this is a much better budget. Anything else?
So sales tax revenue is still
Yeah, so, well, first of all, our overall tax revenues are higher than we had anticipated by the tune of $5 billion. That's significant. And second of all, the increases that we made with state funds were increases that we are going to be able to pay for through the increases in tax revenues that we passed this year. The increases that occurred in connection with the federal funding, that was done with an understanding that it was one-time funding, and that really is recovery steps. For instance, like child care dollars, we have a plan in place. That is not going to have a cliff. We are going to continue to pay for those child care dollars. But I really want some of my other colleagues to be able to answer questions too. So I don't know if any of those questions, folks, I mean, child care?
Yeah, I mean, child care is a good example. I mean, we've had a lot of conversations in conference about what the federal dollars look like, how we should make sure that those, when we put any kind of language of what those should be used for, to make sure that they are sort of direct one-time or two-time costs to really help recover, and then anything that needed, like foundation aid, something like that, needs a path forward after this year as we continue up to the 3-year, which we built into the revenue that we were going to raise. Child care in of itself, the $2.4 billion federal dollars is going to jumpstart our ability to change the child care system, but it will also get us in compliance with a lot of the federal rules for the child care dollars that come every year. And once we do that, we will get an increase in federal dollars for child care. But we're also going to make our own commitment as a state to make sure that when we expand it, when we lower co-pays, when we help our providers, that continues on in perpetuity. That was a commitment we made as a state. So we think that we fiscally paid for what we needed to pay for. We asked a little bit more of our most wealthy in the state to invest, and I think that's a fair thing to do to make our tax code a little more fair for everybody. And so we are going to pay for it. I don't know if anyone else wants to talk about.
I do want to correct, I think I said 2.8 when I was speaking. It is 2.4 for child care.
Sorry.
Senator Cooney, and I guess really this could be for anyone, because you all mentioned how important education is.
Yeah.
We know what the city school district's plan for reopening is, but there are dozens of districts in our area waiting for the state to update its guidance for reopening. They promised it would happen this week, it has not. What are you able to do, if anything, to kind of get this moving, to get some answers for these school districts, these students, and these parents?
So a number of us mentioned that the work continues, and that's exactly the type of work that we have to get started. We know that the 30-day period after the repeal of the governor's emergency powers was around April 6th. And so now we have the opportunity as legislators and lawmakers to make comments on existing governor's orders and directives. And so that process is underway right now, although I will note that a number of us have signed letters of support to the Department of Health specifically around schools reopening, making sure that there is a timeline for that guidance to be delivered. We know that they're going through a process and trying to figure out the safest way, working with the new CDC guidelines to reopen schools. Our superintendents are very anxious. Whether you're suburban or urban, we're having these conversations. But our push is to make sure that we are clearly communicating to this community and to communities across New York, when will a decision be made? And we will continue to push on those issues on behalf of our students who want to come back to the classroom, who want to do so safely, and for the teachers who want to teach them. Anyone else want to comment?
And I'll add that, you know, like Jeremy said, a number of us signed letters asking DOH to give guidance. Yesterday I had a number of conversations with superintendent and with the School Board Association, and I have a call into the commissioner to talk to Commissioner Zucker and encourage DOH to come out with guidelines. Jennifer, you know, because you covered the nursing homes, you know, we make these requests and we hope like heck that the DOH does what they are supposed to do, but we know from the nursing home, sometimes it takes a long, you know, tireless fight to do that.
With the money now, you feel that now the city use as an excuse some of their problems, and what do you expect in return for their performance now that there's the foundation aid that they've been talking about for years?
I think that question sort of relates to the comment I made earlier about the policies. You know, we're fighting, we're advocating for the resources and changing policies at the state level, but we have to be mindful about changing cultures in different environments. I'm a parent, my daughter's a senior at School of the Arts, and she's definitely ready to get back in the classroom. Right now she's going 2 days a week, so we definitely look forward to that opportunity for children to go back to school, but we have to be intentional and mindful as it relates to changing a culture with the history of our school district.
Can you be specific about how the increase in the foundation aid then reflects that culture and how you would expect the district to perform better now that they have the money they've always said they never had?
Okay, so the resources will help with certain aspects as far as things that are needed for the students, but the culture goes back to the interactions, understanding the cultural differences, people having a sense of cultural sensitivity and working with different demographics, and being intentional about having those who are working with our children also reflecting the community in which they serve in. So that's what I mean when I say the culture of it. Thank you.
And I would only also just add, I mean, we have 3 city school grads in our delegation, which is half, because, you know, I was good at math, sort of. But it's if you listen to the students last year when the district had to lay off teachers and there were a lot of protests and advocacy from our students and families, is they want a couple different things, right? They want updated books, they want culturally relevant books, they want more social workers in their building, more emphasis on social and emotional health. They want food that reflects their cultures. They want, I'm trying to think of some of the other, nurses in every school building. These are the things, I mean, we don't tell the school district how to spend their money, but we're happy to, you know, again, elevate the voices of those who are in the school district to make sure that their needs are being heard. And that's what we will continue to do as the foundation aid moves forward. And, you know, there's also over $200 million in federal dollars coming to the city school district to help with just some of the losses around COVID. And we will happily be part of those conversations in terms of making sure our students and families have their needs met.
For districts that have the monitor, though, shouldn't the state be saying how that money should be spent?
So I meet with the superintendent and the monitor every other week. In fact, I'm missing my meeting right now because I'm here with you, but that's okay. They said it was fine. So I've had numerous conversations with the superintendent and Dr. Jallo, the monitor, about this. We talked about, you know, the usage of the money. Assemblymember Clark just mentioned some of those items. We also have an increase in 2 areas that will be helpful for the school district. One is My Brother's Keeper, which I was part of the work group that put that together. President Obama made that request. We were the first state in the nation to do it. It is a strategies to help better educate our young men of color. The school district uses that money for that purpose. Similarly, community-based schools for wraparound services, whether you actually create a community school where all the services are within those schools or not, those funds can be used for the wraparound services. So those are nurses, those are social workers, and things of that nature that will help our students overcome some of the barriers they face to education. I am very confident that this increased dollar amount, both the federal dollar amount plus the state funds, will be utilized to fulfill the state monitor's strategies, both the fiscal reform strategy as well as the academic strategy. I'm very confident that's going to happen. And I know that because of our ongoing interaction. I know that because of the commitment of the leadership of the Rochester City School District, as well as the commitment of the union to make this work.
And I'll just add on that point, Assemblymember, that thanks to your leadership, we were able to have a state monitor, and that's Dr. Shelley Jallo, and we again funded that position in the budget. So that's specifically lined out in the budget just for the salaries and the cost of the school monitor for RCSD.
You guys touched a little on the recent violence. As elected leaders, what can you guys do for the people of the community?
So one of the things that we were intentional about was, you know, supporting $10 million that would actually go towards communities that are dealing with gun violence across the state. And outside of that, it's just also being intentional about educating people on some of the different challenges that exist in the community, and being present and letting the community know that these are issues that are dear to heart. And Frederick Douglass said it best: it's easier to build strong children than to repair broken men. So we want to be intentional, and we are intentional in the budget that we pass, and assuring that we're doing things to change the future outlooks for so many of the children in our community.
Like what? What will that 10 million be used for specifically?
So like there's some different programs across the state. You have organizations like SNUG that actually go into the community, engage people, individuals who they know or believe that may be engaged in a particular lifestyle, offering different opportunities, maybe training programs to try to give people an alternative to the current lifestyle in which they're living.
Anything else? All right, great. Thank you so much for coming today. Appreciate it. Nice job.